Welcome, folks, to this Community Development Block Grant public hearing. We have just two main agenda items today, and before we get started with that, I'll just give you a little bit of background about what Community Development Block Grant is. This meeting is being recorded so that folks can watch this in the future, and hopefully at least some of you, this will be new information. So the block grant is funds that the city receives via the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, typically on an annual basis. It's federal funds that are then granted to the states and then granted by the state to smaller communities. They are meant to be used primarily to benefit low and moderate income people and to combat slum and blight. And so the city has been a mini entitlement of the Commonwealth for a while now, which means that we count on these funds pretty much yearly. They fund a huge range of projects, including public social services, which are sub-grantees of the city, so programs that we grant funds to as well. Our agenda today is to talk about a change in scope to one of our projects and a potential new project, and then to just give the public a sort of general overview of where the many, many projects under this grant are at this point. So the first project I wanted to address is a project under the fiscal year 2022-2023 grant. So we received this at the very end of 2023. It was a 2-year grant because of the pandemic, so it was very, very large. We originally awarded $1.65 million for this project, and we had 5 public social services projects that started up at the end of 2023, and those contracts were meant to end today, the 30th of June. And our next grant cycle is starting up on January 1st, 2026. So for some of these programs, which are programs that we fund pretty consistently, they ended up with about a 6-month gap between funding. So what we're proposing is to take $33,000 that are unexpended from a sidewalk replacement budget. We had some projects come in with bids under our original budget, so those funds are currently unallocated. And we're going to reallocate them to the Center for Self-Reliance Food Pantry on Main Street, which is a project of Community Action Pioneer Valley. Like I said, this is an ongoing project, so they've already received funds under this grant. They're already obviously operating at full capacity. And the goal here is just to kind of bridge them over so that they don't have to reduce their staffing until they can receive their other funding in January. So it's a relatively straightforward process because this is already an ongoing project. But we have to hold a public hearing, make sure the public is aware that we're reallocating these funds. With this additional funds to the Center for Self-Reliance, we will be right at the maximum that we're allowed to grant to public social services. I will say one thing we've heard consistently from the public at these hearings is that folks want us to max out what we give to our local social services, and we're happy to do that. So that, if anyone has any questions or comments about that, I'm happy to give you some more information. If you have specific questions about the Center for Self-Reliance, we're also lucky to have Francis Hall from Community Action here as well to answer questions. Stephanie.
Hi, Stephanie Duclos, 166 Chapman Street. I actually did have a few questions. This $33,000 coming from our sidewalks to go did I hear that it's going to a salary for someone at the Center of Reliance? I mean, I know that we have a lot of potholes, and if we can reallocate that money to stuff that it should have gone to, I guess, in the first place, I'd feel better about that. And I'm confused because I thought you said there was 2 parts of the hearing, and I thought that this money was to go to a locker or some lockers. So I'm a little confused. If you could clarify, that'd be great.
Yeah, so we will get to the lockers. That's the second part, like you said. These funds, they were originally part of the projected budget for sidewalk replacements that we completed last summer. We take an estimate from the city's engineering supervisor, and that's the budget we give the state to allocate to those projects. Unfortunately, the bid came in under that. So understandable that the next question is, can we allocate those funds to another sidewalk or infrastructure project? In the first instance, that's the easy, straightforward thing to do. The reality is just that 33,000 actually is not enough to do a substantial sidewalk project at all. The sort of minimum for any chunk of sidewalk that we've looked at is in the 100,000 range, really for well under a half mile. So it's funds we have to use up by the end of this calendar year. And so the straightforward thing to do after we kind of exhausted that possibility was to look for another existing project that could use the funds. But that's why they don't get automatically reallocated to a sidewalks project. And I'm sorry, was there a second part to your question, Stephanie?
Well, I'm just saying, because maybe recall that it was the Complete Streets project, but I'm not 100% sure where that grant money was completely allocated, because I know that some of the sidewalks in my neighborhood, some of the neighbors decided they didn't want sidewalks in, so they had talked about maybe moving the money to another like project. We currently have a sinkhole in the middle of one of our sidewalks here on Chapman, and we're not asking for a complete street to be done. I mean, if we're tight on money and I can visibly see a sinkhole impacting the walkway, I would think $33,000 could help maybe fill up some of those holes that I keep, right. So I don't know. I have a problem when we try to allocate the money to something that is, I guess, a value choice, rather than I can visibly see a hole in the sidewalk and we're complaining about staffing and money on the DPW side. And we're now taking $33,000 and change to move it to an agency that apparently seemed like it was going to salaries, when the hole on my street is still not fixed. So I don't know if it's a monetary issue or if it's just a labor issue, but I'd like that hole fixed before we even contemplate giving this money away. Thank you.
I'm not sure what the Complete Streets project was that had to do with sidewalks. I will say that Chapman Street is on the list of sidewalk replacements for the fiscal year 25 grant, but I'm not positive we will be able to do it. And the reason is that in order to do any infrastructure projects with CDBG, we have to prove to the state that the neighborhood is predominantly low or moderate income, and that means doing
It
surveys.
absolutely 100% is. I actually live in this neighborhood, and the majority is Section 8 housing or low income homeowners. So we completely qualify for that designation.
I hear you, but that is something I need evidence of to give to the state. And they've been quite stringent about that, which is why we do the income surveys. I will say, if you live in Chapman Street, please, when I release my income surveys this summer, make sure that you and your neighbors fill them out, because it's super important for us to be able to get the funding approved. Otherwise, I can't use it for infrastructure.
I'm sorry, what kind of evidence would you need?
Like I said, it's a survey. And so we need to show that a statistically significant sample of people surveyed reported that they were low or moderate income.
It's a requirement that the state makes us do. We might objectively know or hazard a good guess that that street is predominantly low or moderate income, but EOHLC, the state agency that runs this grant, has a certain way that they require us to prove it, which is why we have to do the income surveys, unfortunately.
Yeah, and
can't you get that information from the housing authority that actually pays the rents on several of the places I'm living next to? I mean, most of them are Section 8 or mental health, or
I think it's information we likely could get in a number of ways, but the state mandates that we get it in this one particular way.
But what is, I'm sorry, did you mention the way that they get it? Beside, I mean, you're going to go and knock on doors survey, or are you going to have expectation that all of the low income housing people that are in that neighborhood that will never receive it unless you knock on the door because it's all absentee landlords. So I'm wondering how on earth are you going to get an effective survey unless you actually get that information from like a Section 8 housing or subsidized housing authority?
Yeah, I mean, the number of units that are subsidized housing is obviously a good source of evidence, but it doesn't necessarily show that the majority of residents in a given area are low or moderate income, which is why we do the survey. It is a paper survey that gets mailed to people's homes. It can be filled out online and both or mailed back to the city. We've done this for a couple of neighborhoods over the past few years, and the response rate leaves something to be desired, but I've been able to get a sufficient enough sample in both cases. And yeah, just subjectively and generally speaking, you know, I also live in Greenfield. I absolutely know which neighborhoods are low and moderate income, and it's very frustrating that the state doesn't necessarily trust local expertise on these things, but these are the regulations that we're operating under.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Jimmy?
Yes, so you say there's to allocate this money, there would have had to be surveys and stuff like that done. So what are the surveys that have to be done to allocate it in this manner, to do it for lockers? Is there any requirements at the state? And I wonder how we had time to do that requirements and not versus using this money for what it was originally intended to be
Yeah.
used for.
So again, we're not talking about funding for lockers. This is funding for the Center for Self-Reliance Food Pantry. And the food pantry actually does an intake with every single person who receives benefits there, where they declare their income. They've been receiving these funds for a while now, and I'm pretty sure every year it's been about 99% or so of beneficiaries are low or moderate income. So that's the evidence that the state accepts for that. I will also say, and this is another source of frustration, that the bar for infrastructure projects with CDBG is much higher. And I understand that part of the reason is that the state worries that we'll allocate infrastructure funds to neighborhoods that already have moderate high income residents. So I understand why that is a high threshold, but like I said, it's a source of frustration for myself as well.
And just one other quick thing, when you said that at first this would be to supplement to keep people on board, that they would have to let go until the next set of funding. And a lot of this funding, so it can supplement salary, this grant funding. Pretty much it can supplement like
Yeah,
that.
no,
type of stuff. A
I
lot of
won't
it
say,
usually
say
sets
that.
criteria that you can't do that.
I'm sorry, I missed the last thing you said.
A lot of when I look at grants, a lot of the time it says it can't like be for funding positions or shortfalls in budgets and stuff like that. So I was just wondering how that's worked around also.
Yes, that's a good question. I didn't say, and I can't say that someone would have been let go from the food pantry. I don't know that to be the case, but for most of our public social services, and we support at this moment in time, 9 different social services in Greenfield at the moment. A good chunk of that funding does go to the direct care workers' salaries. So no one at 393 Main Street in Community Action is getting paid with CDBG funds. It's the people who work at the food pantry.
All right, thank you. Just wanted to know the clarifications because it was just a weird allocation to go from sidewalks to nonprofit food pantries and lockers. So just just was wondering that and how that all worked.
Fair
Thank you
enough,
for
yeah.
the clarification.
Yep. Any other comments or questions about the Center for Self-Reliance? Okay, like I said, that's the existing grant that we expect to have closed out by the end of this calendar year. So I want to talk about the proposed lockers project and also give you an overview of what that grant looks like. And I'm going to do that by plugging in my computer, which will hopefully work.
I feel like you did some money switching around. No, it's not.
Okay, so this was the original fiscal year 22-23 budget. We applied for this grant in March of 2023. As you can see on the left, we really just had 5 projects that we thought all of the funds would go to, and boy, were we wrong about that. We've added a bunch of projects to this and switched around some of the funds. So at this point, and like I said, today is the last day of the fiscal year. I'm also happy to email these slides to you if that's helpful. It's the last day of the fiscal year, so the social services projects, with the exception of Center for Self-Reliance, will all be closed out as of today. Let's see, we added the Hope and Russell Street sidewalk project, which I wrote complete this morning when I thought it was, but it's actually not quite done. The sidewalk has been replaced, but they're still adding some fencing there. We've fully completed the design and engineering for replacement of water mains on Main Street as well as Chapman Street, and the construction for that. There's a southern chunk of Chapman Street adjacent to Main Street. That construction is expected to start soon. And then we have a couple of ongoing projects. There is some remaining, and I should clarify, the reason that there's often sort of remaining funds in some of these buckets is both because projects that get bid out sometimes come in under budget, which is always exciting, but also because a chunk of CDBG goes to administration, which includes my salary and parts of the salaries of some of my colleagues. And we've had folks coming and going since this grant started. So that's always a little bit of an estimate. And anytime there's any dollar left over in admin, we try to reprogram it into a project. So we're proposing a new project that hadn't previously been in this grant. It's a small budget project, but the proposal is to purchase the hardware of lockers that could be used as storage for members of the unhoused community. The proposal for this is based loosely on a program that they have in the city of Northampton, where the city had purchased storage lockers. And when I say storage lockers, I literally mean like the lockers that you find in a high school. So relatively small, but large enough to be able to store some of your belongings. And in Northampton, the city purchased this hardware, but then they entered into a memorandum of agreement with a local social services agency to administer it. So that's kind of the paradigm that we're talking about here. And the funding, again, for the hardware purchase would potentially come from CDBG. I noticed Councilor Brown is here from the city's ad hoc committee on the unhoused community. I wonder if there's anything you'd like to add, Councilor, to where this idea came from and what you guys have decided in terms of how this should look.
Not too much to add, just appreciative that you all are working on this, since this is a need that we've been hearing from folks, and just grateful that this is happening. So thanks for your work.
Thank you.
I'm not against the project at all. I'm against where the funding comes.
No,
Jimmy,
I'm not.
do you know you're off mute? I'm happy to call on you if you wanted to share. No. Other folks want to comment on this project?
I'd like to speak.
Go ahead.
So I have concern about the placement of where they're going. And I do not actually like supporting giving agencies money that doesn't come back to us. So if we give, say, $10,000 to CSO, because I don't know, apparently everybody that's coming from Northampton says, oh, this works in Northampton. So apparently Greenfield it's going to work in. So if you're bringing, giving an agency like CSO this $10,000 for their lockers, I don't understand why. They get ample funding and they don't pay taxes, and they have a immense impact on our public safety services. So I I'm not in favor if that's where this allocation is going to. I have yet to hear anybody declare where these lockers will go. I actually thought they were going to go down to the center for Reliance on on Main Street. I thought that was a great placement. It's easily accessible to all the people. But if you're telling me they're going to go in my backyard, again, I'm not going to be very pleased about this. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you. I want to clarify again that this is not proposed funding that would go to any social services agency. In fact, and someone should correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I believe the paradigm in Northampton is that the agency doesn't get paid to administer it, certainly not by Community Development Block Grant. These are funds that we're proposing just to go to the hardware. And you'll notice I was a little vague about where they'll be placed because I don't know, and it definitely won't be my decision. But as Stephanie pointed out, there's been a couple of different sites that have been under discussion. And I think that's something that ultimately the ad hoc committee and the mayor's office will have to decide. But the proposal is simply to purchase the hardware.
And for the city to purchase, just to be super clear.
Yeah. I mean, presumably this will also involve an agreement, if it's placed on private property with the city, that they must be maintained, that if something happens to them, that the property owner is responsible for them, this type of thing. Other comments or questions? Like I said, the specifics are still being hashed out. I expect we'll talk about this again at a future public hearing if we're lucky enough to have one later this summer. I should also say that folks are always welcome to email comments or questions to myself about any of the CDBG projects. But while I have a captive audience, I will also tell you all about the other CDBG projects. The fiscal year 2024 program started up last fall. It at the moment still just has 4 elements, which feels like a real win. So we have a newly restarted housing rehabilitation program. The idea with this program is that it will assist with critical repairs on the homes of, we estimated, 2 to 4 low and moderate income greenfield homeowners. We're currently working on the very first of these, so it does take quite a bit of time. This is not your average home repairs program. It requires quite a few sort of bureaucratic hoops that we have to jump through. The 24 program also included this allocation to the Franklin County CDC for their micro enterprise assistance program. Micro enterprise assistance is sort of the CDBG terminology, but this is basically the work that they do, again, with low income greenfield residents who are looking to start up a business. They have one-on-one counseling, they have small grants, and some group activities as well. And so that just got started up this calendar year. There's 5 social services under the fiscal year 2024 program, and those just started up in January, I believe. So those, it's early days with those. And then we allocated some funds for water mains design and engineering. Only one of those has gotten started just yet, and it's for water main replacement on Davis Street. So that's where we are with fiscal year 24. And then fiscal year 25, we just submitted our application to the state. I say just, that was in April. And it involves, again, 5 social services programs, another slate of sidewalk improvements. The only one of those I can confirm right now is a chunk of sidewalk on, oh, I hope I'm not misspeaking, Elm Street, close to the housing authority. And that, in fact, was one that the state did approve without us conducting income surveys, simply on the basis of the overwhelming number of public housing units in the area. As I said earlier, that we're also hoping to allocate some of those funds to a good chunk of sidewalk replacement on Chapman Street. And then a third location, TBD. The city is currently working on revamping our full sidewalk inventory. So we're kind of putting a pin in that until that work is completed. So as I said, we submitted that application in April, proposal to EOHLC, which is the state agency that oversees this grant. They assure us that we should be receiving the award in October or sometime this fall. We usually have to give ourselves a couple of months to complete contracting. So those projects on the previous slide, those aren't expected to start up until 2026 in January and expected to be completed by March 31st, 2027. Any last comments or questions about any of these projects or CDBG in general? I used to teach college students, so I always leave a good chunk of time after I ask my questions in case somebody changes their mind. But like I said, if you have comments or questions, you should always feel free to email me. If you do, I don't have the hearing notice in front of me, but I usually leave a date on it by which any comments you give me will be included in the public record that we share with the state about this particular public hearing. So if you wanted to put something in writing, you're welcome to do that as well. Thanks, folks, for attending.
Yeah, 5 o'clock on Friday.
5 o'clock on Friday is the deadline to send me written comments if you would like to. All right. Thanks so much, folks. Enjoy the beautiful day.